Hello and welcome to another episode of Chasing Excellence. My name is Patrick Cummings. As always, I'm here with Ben Bergeron. Thank you so much for joining us this week. How are you, Ben?
Doing great, Patrick. Excited to chat with you.
You as well. We've got listener questions about how to think about the year we're wrapping up, the year we're about to enter, and the value of negative visualization. Here's the question. I go into every new year feeling sort of disappointed with what I've accomplished in the previous one, but super optimistic about the new one. Of course, things which I didn't anticipate will start to go wrong. So I want to go in prepared for things to go wrong and ready to tackle those challenges head on, rather than expecting things to go right and be disappointed. You guys have talked about the power of negative visualization. That makes sense in a specific sports context where the situation is like, my jump rope breaks or I get a bad judge. But when thinking about life in general, it's stuff like my dad could get cancer and die, or I could be unemployed and unable to find a new job, things which are pretty overwhelming. So how do I mentally prepare for things to go wrong without just worrying about them?
Okay, so if the question is, how do I prepare for things to go wrong without getting overwhelmed by them? You've talked about negative visualization in sports. And just so let's have an understanding of what that means if people haven't listened before. The idea behind that is the top performers are not just visualizing the perfect race, the perfect match, the perfect game. They're visualizing themselves experiencing adversities, challenges, hardship. But here's what I think is being missed. They're not visualizing it and getting overwhelmed. What we're doing is we're practicing the visualization of overcoming those challenges. We're practicing not being rattled by those things, practicing being able to walk through those things, staying centered. So this is the big Michael Phelps thing. One of the big things he credits Bob Bowman, his coach, for is not only preparing him to race the perfect race, but to be able to prepare him for what happens if his goggles fill up with water. What happens if he false starts? What happens if he's behind at the last turn? He goes to kick off the wall and his foot slips. What happens if he's in a bad lane? What happens if... And now what ends up happening is he's unrattleable. He can't be rattled because whatever could come and face him, he's like, I can handle that, bro. Been there before because I visualized it. To me, this isn't so much about, quote, negative visualization, because especially when we get out of the realm of sport into life, there is no way we're going to be able to visualize all of the possible adversities, challenges that we could face. It is infinite and impossible to predict. And we like to think that we are prediction machines. The one thing that we have to accept is the uncertainty of our lives. It is a reality we all must face. The thing that we are trying to do is to be able to handle whatever comes at us. That's what we're practicing. So it is not the visualization of your dad getting cancer and letting that spill over into anxiety. It's the exact opposite of that. If my dad gets cancer, you don't have to visualize it. You can do it, but if that thought comes in your head and you're rattled by it, we're not there yet. And that's okay. That's totally okay. I don't think many of us are. I'm not there yet. I'm not going to be able to be okay with that. So what we need to do is work on the stuff that's within our threshold. This is where change happens. Outside of our threshold, you go into panic mode. That's where anxiety sets in and there's no change. You're fear-based. That's why that visualization of your dad is rattling you. So what we need to do is let's work on the smaller stuff. And this is how all change happens. If it's too easy, then no change happens. If it's too hard, then no change happens. If you're bench pressing a broomstick, you're not going to get any stronger. If you're trying to bench press 500 pounds, you're not going to get any stronger. You need to find that weight. Is it, I don't know what it is for you. Is it 185 pounds, 225, 315? What is the right weight that is going to create the appropriate stimulus for change and adaptation? In this case, the change and adaptation is not the musculature of your upper body pushing muscles. It's the ability the mind's ability to be able to handle greater adversities. So this is why every single day, if we walk around with this level of awareness, we will be setting ourselves up for success, at least greater percentage of success when the bigger things come. So this is the whole deal. Recognize, what is it that rattles us? What is it that knocks us off center? So we wake up in the morning and we're good to go. Or are we? When the alarm goes off, does that put you in a bad mood? If so, we got to work on that thing. We got to work on that. We got to work on reframing it from the get-go. When you go to take a shower and there's no body wash, there's no soap, do you get pissed off because you now have to go out of the shower, turn it off and go find some more? You have to take a shower without it. They're everywhere. These things that knock us off center are everywhere. And if we walk around with the awareness of when we are getting triggered, then we have the opportunity to grow and evolve. If we don't, we're not training. We're just in our subconscious default patterns. And I see this a lot. The people that get rattled by when someone cuts them off in traffic. Man, that's such an incredible training opportunity that's being missed. You're in the gym doing mental reps when somebody cuts you off. This is the chance to work through the mundane. What are training opportunities? Anytime your reality is not meeting your desired expectation. You have a way that you want your day to unfold. You want people to treat you a certain way, say certain things to you, and have ease and peace of mind and all that. When that doesn't happen, you're triggered. How quickly do you move on? This is the essence of being a more successful human being, and the way we determine success, not in terms of your earning potential, the way other people do. This is in terms of you ending up on your deathbed happy with the way you spent your life. Because if you get rattled by everyone else, you are losing your power. You are giving up your power. You are a leaf blowing in the wind, and anything outside of you affects you. What we want to recognize is all of the power is inside of you, and anything that comes at you doesn't necessarily need to affect the inside. Now, your dad getting cancer for most of us is, and that's okay. But how far can we go? Where is the threshold? What rattles you? When you see somebody post something bad about you on social media, that's a good one to work through because it rattles the heck out of me. And can we work through that? That's what we want to do, is not like awareness. Whoa, that really changed my state. It changed the way I was walking through the world. I was relatively at peace. I was calm. And now I am angry. Now I am anxious. Now I am depressed. Now I am. Something changed that. It didn't need to, but it did because of all of our pre-programming. Some of that is inherited, us as human beings based off our ancestors. Some of it is learned, but it's not the way it actually is. You don't need that to happen. Case in point, back in the day when someone died, it was a celebration. In certain cultures, that's like the greatest thing that can happen. That's not saying that's the way I'm going to react when my loved ones go, but it doesn't necessarily mean that's the case. So when we think about that idea of negative visualization, it's not the negative visualization that's the power. It is the ability to say, when these things come at me, I will remain in control. This is what athletes do. I will remain in control because what happens outside doesn't affect what happens inside. But what happens to most people? it layers on a level of judgment. That guy's faster than me. Oops, I won't be able to catch him. I'm going to choke it back a gear for self-preservation. That doesn't need to happen. So can we not be as influenced by the external? Can we focus on the internal?
When you say influenced, I think that's that's a great word for what it is. And what I was thinking about was so much of the off-centeredness, so much of the trouble we get ourselves into is when we resist versus when we go with whatever that thing might be, whatever that trigger is, whatever that thing that somebody said, whatever that misalignment of what I wanted to happen and what actually happened occurs. The harder we resist, the harder it is to get beyond, the harder it is to see beyond whatever it is right in front of us. And so I think that's, I think about the Michael Phelps story, which we've obviously talked about before. But the secret to that is not, and the secret to the negative visualization, I think, is not, kind of to your point, like not dwelling on it, but it's happening. I've practiced this. I expected this on some level, and now I can move with it versus fight against the preservation of what I wanted to happen in the first place. And then you get that negative sewer cycle of, well, why is this happening? Woe is me. I can't believe it's going on. I'm going to lose this race. I'm going to fall apart, etc. So much of it is the acceptance of something happening. We didn't want it. Maybe we can't predict it, but it's how quickly, how fast can we close the gap between the discomfort of it and the resistance to it, to the accepting of it and the doing something about it.
Michael Singer has a great analogy that explains exactly what you're saying incredibly well. And that is when a leaf falls in a still pond, it creates ripples. Mm-hmm. Leaves are going to fall in the pond. That's going to happen. No matter how clean you want your pond to stay, and the pond is representation of the mind. Mm-hmm. Something is going to come in that causes a disturbance in the mind. The best thing you can do to get back to the still mind is to just let things be. Just a leaf fell, caused a little ripple, and let it go. Now, sometimes it's not a leaf. Sometimes it's a twig. Sometimes it's a branch. Sometimes it's a tree that falls in there. And they're going to cause bigger splashes, bigger messes, and it's going to take longer for it to fall back to stillness. But always, the fastest way to get back to the still pond is to let things be, let things settle. But what do most of us do? We try to jump in the pond and get the leaf out. Well, once we jump in the pond, we're making more of a mess. Sometimes a little leaf falls in and we grab a stick and start whacking at it to try to get it out, causing more ripples. Sometimes a branch falls in and we bring a backhoe in to try to pull that branch out. This is the equivalent of, you already said it once, but someone said something about you on your comments. Mm-hmm. Someone says, wow, you're chubby. Like, oh crap. Like, now what's the best thing we can do to let ourselves get back to the still mind? We go, that hurts. That sucks. Whew, okay, gone, done. It happened. We can't do it. The leaf fell. This is what we talk about in terms of our framework for the different phases of the mind. If we are a realist, we understand that leaves are going to fall. So when you give a presentation at work and you say something dumb, what's the thing that, we want to go and send an email to everyone, go like, hey, I can't believe I said that. Or the reason that happened was because Jim said this thing, and you go in, you make a bigger mess. Or we just hold on to it. To your point, we bottle it down and we resist and we go, I can't believe I freaking said that. I'm such an idiot. And you just hold on to this thing that now is self-defining. What we need to do is just feel it. That was a brain fart. Oh, well, that's done. like my life's not going to go forever without those things, and you just kind of move through it. I'm a learner. I'm just going to learn from this instead of like judge myself. And the more that we can navigate life, someone's cut you off in traffic, your spouse is going to be home late and you have to do more stuff with the kids. Like any one of these things that sets your mind from this nice, easy, peaceful to, oof, there's some ripples. And always, the fastest way to get back to a still mind is to let it go.
Let's say thanks to a few sponsors, and then we'll get back into this conversation. We're brought to you by 8 Sleep, a leader in sleep technology that transforms your existing bed into a sleep optimization powerhouse. Are you ready to become an absolute sleep champion? Well, head over to 8sleep.com/excellence. Use the code excellence to get $350 off your very own Pod 4 Ultra. The Pod is equipped with advanced technology for precise temperature regulation and comprehensive biometric tracking. Clinical studies have shown that the Pod can increase quality sleep duration by up to 1 hour every single night. Imagine having a personal sleep coach that adjusts the temperature throughout the night based on your sleep patterns. It'd be weird if you had an actual sleep coach sitting next to you all night long while you slept, but you don't need that awkwardness because you'll have the Pod. The Pod incorporates sensors that monitor several key physiological parameters, including sleep stages, heart rate variability, and respiratory rate. The non-invasive tracking allows precise data collection without the potential sleep disruptions associated with wearable devices or that aforementioned sleep coach who might, move or sneeze or poke you because he's getting bored and he wants to talk about something. Trust me, your body will thank you for this investment in better sleep. Visit 8sleep.com/excellence. Use the code excellence for up to $350 off your Pod 4 Ultra. We're also brought to you by the Defender, a vehicle designed for those who embrace the impossible. Explore the Defender lineup at LandRoverUSA.com. Have you ever looked at a challenge and thought, well, that seems impossible? Maybe it's running a marathon, starting a business, learning a new language, running a marathon while learning a new language. That actually might be impossible. These moments of doubt are, in fact, universal. But here's what's fascinating. The most remarkable achievements in history came from people who faced the word impossible and saw it as an invitation. They didn't just accept challenges, they pursued them. They didn't just dream, they took action. And they understood that the journey towards seemingly impossible goals is what defines us. For those who share this mindset, there's a vehicle that matches the spirit. It's called the Defender. Engineered to meet challenges head on, the Defender is an icon reimagined through modern design. With legendary capability, off-road and on, it's ready for your next adventure. Design your Defender at LandRoverUSA.com. That's LandRoverUSA.com. Okay, back to the show. I want to transition a little bit to the other part of this question that I really liked. We're coming at the end of a year. I'm likely in the last few years, we've talked about kind of maybe what your process is like reflecting on a year and anticipating the year to come. I love this question. I think this is why I like this one so much, because I think I resonate with this. I relate to it. I leave every year feeling sort of disappointed, but I'm super optimistic about the new one, right? There's a little bit of a strange disconnect between those two things, if that's a cycle that keeps happening. But I'm curious, how do you think about the year we're wrapping up? How do you think about the year to come? Do you have any sort of process for doing those two related kind of interdependent exercises?
Let's talk about it conceptually, and then we'll talk about it mechanically. Conceptually, you're spot on. We overestimate what we can accomplish in a year and drastically underestimate what we can accomplish in a decade. A year's not that long. You're not going to make that many changes. But a decade of doing what you're doing and staying consistent, pounding on your craft, doing the right things, instilling the right habits will turn you into a different person. So that's the first one, conceptually. Don't beat yourself up. It's 365 days. That's not that long of a time. You're awake for 16 hours, you work 8, you do some other stuff for the other 4 before work, another 4 after work. It goes by super quick, dude. Don't beat yourself up. Stay optimistic for the next year. Now, the mechanistic one is something that you can steal from a business practice, which we implement, which is break up the year into days, weeks, quarters, and the year. So I've done this for years, is every single morning, write down something memorable that happened the day before. This is a phenomenal practice. If you want to actually see what you do in a year, because if you're like me, which this guy sounds like he is, you forget what you've actually done and how far you've come. It's just a matter of you have a crappy memory. Write down something memorable, and sometimes it's big, sometimes it's small. Sometimes it's drove Bodie to practice and had a really cool conversation about finances. He's 11, right? But it was really cool to have that conversation. Wrote that down. And at the end of the year, go back and read the 365 things from the previous year. And you're like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot I did that weekend away. I totally forgot that I stepped in and substitute coached that soccer game when I don't know anything about soccer. And that was such a crazy, weird experience. Like whatever it might be, right? But write down, and all of a sudden you go like, whoa, I didn't think a whole lot happened this past year. And look at these 365 touch points. And I'm going to emphasize this one. They're not all going to be showstoppers. In fact, there's going to be very, very few showstoppers, but that's kind of the magic of it when you go back and you do this thing. Had a great lunch with a coworker, and you're like, oh, I remember that lunch. That was a really cool thing to almost relive the year when you read it. And I would suggest you read it on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. And I've done this over the course of the past handful of years. Phenomenal. The next one is what we do, and Patrick, you know this, is beginning of each week, write down what you accomplished the last week. Write down 1, 2, or 3, no more than 3 things that you accomplished the past week. And in our business, each team leader shares that with the other team. So everyone goes like, oh, this is one of the things that happens in business is the same thing. You just feel like you're spinning. You're just kind of doing the same thing over and over. Hugely recommend this for CrossFit gym owners because it seems like it's just a cog where you're just doing the same thing over and over. And this is why businesses don't grow, because people aren't doing things. They're just coaching classes. But what did you accomplish? What did you build? What did you make? What did you do? What did you create that last week? And then the same thing. Now you have 52 of those guys at the end of it. Amazing. And then quarterly, set yourself up for different. So instead of going backwards, go forward. What is the thing that I want to do this quarter? What is the 1, 2, or 3 priorities? Now it sounds weird because we talked about this on the show before. Priority is a 1, it's a singular. What is the singular thing? And I'm totally cool with that. What is the singular thing you want to accomplish over the next 90 days? This really changes the people that go into every year optimistic, but then end up at the year like, I don't know if I really ended up anywhere.
Yeah.
These 90-day chunks, it's been shown, are long enough to create real change, but short enough to create enough urgency that they happen. So I am going to go to the gym in the next 90 days. I'm going to go to the gym 60 days. 60 of the next 90 days, I'm going to go to the gym. Let's see it. Let's go do that. Or I am going to do 1 pull-up on the first day, 2 pull-ups on the next day, 3 pull-ups on the next day, 4, 5, every day, add a pull-up till I get to 30. Then I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to do it with clapping push-ups, and I'm going to do it again with 135-pound thrusters, right? Like whatever it might be. Okay, now I'm getting somewhere. I'm going to run 100 meters on the first day, 200 meters on the third day, 300 meters the next day. I'm just throwing crap out there because you could build anything fitness-wise. I am going to work on my book. In the next 90 days, I am going to create a outline. At the end of those days, I'm going to have an outline. You got to check in a lot. You can't just get to the end of 90 days and go, did I do it? Every week, you got to have your checkpoints like, am I on track or off track? And then at the end of the year, I don't think we're going to look back and go, what happened? Because you have a record of what happened and you were pushing that in the right direction because you were forward facing on a quarterly basis.
2 businessy books if folks want to kind of get a sense of from the business perspective. But of course, if you read it, you can translate it, which you and I do, translate it to real life. Traction, which is something we've talked about a lot, Gino Wickman, and Measure What Matters, think the author's name is Doerr, Doerr, and he talks about OKRs, objectives and key results. But again, you can kind of reverse engineer those for life as well. Maybe the last place to spend a little bit of time, it's not a book that I've read. I'm not sure if you've read it either, but I've heard you reference it before, which is why I think about it, which is the concept of the gap versus the gain by Benjamin Hardy, and I'm blanking on his co-writer's name. And the book is called, I think, The Gap and the Gain.
They have two books. It's the guy that created, why am I blanking on this? Huge. It's actually what Traction came out of.
Oh, and it's Sullivan, Dan Sullivan.
Dan Sullivan, thank you. So he created an incredibly huge entrepreneurial system. Gap and the Gain is one of their books, but the next book is the one I read. So I did not read Gap and the Gain, but I read the second one. I'm blanking on the name of it.
10X is easier than 2X.
10X, I read it a couple months ago. Really highly recommend that book. Very much
Okay, so the Gap and the Gain, really briefly, because I know just conceptually what it is about, is that we often spend our time in one of two places: the gap, which is the gap between where I want to be and where I am, or the gain, where I am as it relates to where I came from. Yeah. How much and the value or the perception that we have of ourselves and of our time is wholly dependent on where we are focused. Are we focused on the things we have not yet accomplished, or are we focused on the distance that we have traveled from where we started to today? And it strikes me like this is the central question here in this particular conversation, which is like, I feel like I didn't accomplish very much this year, but I'm really excited about where I'm going, which is 100% living in the gap. It's like I'm thinking all about where I could go, and I'm focused on what I have not yet accomplished instead of, and I think about this because of what your kind of your daily focusing on, like what was one win from yesterday? What was one win from last week? Is living in the gain. It's living in the space between where I was and what I am. And I just think about that's, I mean, it's for whatever reason, it's so easy to live in the gap. It's so easy to focus on what we have not accomplished, what we did not do yet, or what we did not do at all. And yet all of us, most of us can, if we're really honest with ourselves, and we sat down with a piece of paper and long enough time, we could come up with 10, 15, 20 things that we accomplished that before we accomplished them, we'd be like, yeah, it'd be amazing if I could do that. If I could get myself to there, if I could earn that much money, if I could meet X kind of person, right? And then we focus on the next thing that we do not yet have.
This is medicine that I need to take. Like,
me
for
too.
sure. I mean, this is like, I'm always looking at where I want to be going, particularly. That's interesting. I think it's domain specific.
Mm-hmm, totally.
I do not do that with my family. No, actually I do. I still go like, I want to move to Montana and have I want to have no responsibilities and go, whitewater rafting and hiking and skiing with my kids. And like, I have this thing in my brain that like, that's what there is. That's like where we should, that's where I should be living as a family. Not living like physically, like spending our time. I think where I don't have it is with fitness and health necessarily. Oh no, I do as well because I still want to like be. I do
because we've talked about it recently.
For
we talked
sure,
about, like,
business. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked about complacency in an episode not too far ago, and being kind of our general thought process being kind of antithetical to complacency. And so there is a balance there, right? It's not having ambition. It's not embracing complacency, but maybe it comes back to something that you said a couple of times now in this conversation, which is the judgment of ourselves. And therein lies whether it's poison or whether it's medicine, right? If you're thinking about Montana and you're beating yourself up, like, I can't believe I haven't accomplished that yet. I can't believe that I haven't prioritized X, Y, and Z so that I could do it. Then that's a poison. Then we're living in the gap. But if it's, oh man, I'm working so hard now so that I can do this, and I'm putting these things in place, and I can't wait to take one step closer to Montana, then that's the medicine that we're looking for.
I think that is the medicine. I think you're exactly right. It is the approach, and it's really cool because Sullivan and Hardy, it's very much, they're talking about 10xing your life, making your business 10 times bigger. So they're not complacency at all. What they're saying is this is the roadmap to actually do the things that you want to do, is to not get caught up in what you have not done yet. It's to your point, it's the judgment and the getting caught up in versus the gratitude of where you are. And the thing to spin back to is it's very easy for us to the listener's point, to get judgmental over the last year. I mean, if I was to look at this, to look at the last year of our business, we're flat. Like, this is one of the first times in the history of our business we've been flat. And it's like, what the crap? Like, and it's really easy to do that. But if you look at where we are from 10 years ago again, and I think about where I am as an entrepreneur from 10 years ago, I never would have envisioned this. So it's not linear. And that's the whole thing. It's that graph that we've drawn 100 times on the whiteboard, the two of us, which is the way we think it goes, which is point from bottom left to upper right in a straight line. That's what we want it to do. The way we think it goes, which is this nice stair step. But it's not that at all. It is the roller coaster up and down, but much like the market as a whole, much like evolution as a whole, while there are steps back, while there are plateaus, over a long enough timeline, it always goes up and to the right. And that's where I really encourage the 10-year thing. If you're going to go back and go, what have I accomplished? Do it over the 10 years, not over the one, because the one you might not be better off. That might be the case. Maybe you got sick. Maybe a loved one got sick and you need to spend, 6 months by their bedside. That's not the wrong thing. That's the right thing. Maybe the market did some things. You don't have control over that. So you're going to have to take times of adjustments and re-steer in appropriate ways. And if we're always looking for this continual incremental gain that goes on infinitely, we're going to be disappointed. Instead, just zoom out. And this is where the 1 versus the 10 comes in.
Love that. All right, we will wrap it up there. Thank you. That was super fun. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. Thank you for your ratings and your reviews. One more reminder, head to chasingexcellence.email. We'll put the link in the show notes as well. Get on the newsletter. Ben and I will be back next week for another episode of Chasing Excellence.